Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. We're living in a strange moment where the word peace is mostly used as decoration. You open the news, and you get the usual picture. Geneva, Abu Dhabi, some Trump plan, 20-something points, leaks, historic opportunity, last chance to stop the war. Then you start looking inside, like a technician opening a mechanism, and you see, this is not a plan, it's noise. Nothing is agreed, nobody is accountable. And yet people are told that tomorrow everything will be signed and their gas bills will magically fall. Here's the central contradiction. The system says the global arbiter is back. But in practice, this arbiter has no single text, no single voice, and no clear objective. And the bill for this theater doesn't go to Geneva or Abu Dhabi. It goes into your utility payments, your taxes, and the factories closed in your town. To avoid drowning in someone else's hysteria, you have to start from a simple number. On this planet, we have almost 200 states with flags and chairs in international organizations. But truly sovereign players, who can independently decide questions of war and peace, barely fill one football team. Between these two numbers lives our entire world politics. That gap is exactly what official narratives prefer not to discuss. And this is where the official story falls apart. The whole story around the Trump plan is useful as an X-ray of the system. We're sold a beautiful legend. A wise American leader gathers the best strategists and produces a document with 20+ points that will judge everyone fairly. In reality, we don't know the basics. Which version of the text went to Moscow? Which version went to Kiev? Which was shown to the Europeans? And whether they even match by half. This isn't negotiations. It's like three captains in a storm getting different charts of the same strait and each being told, this is the final version, push the throttle. The media behave like junior partners of a sales department. They take a fragment, a ripped outline, a half-baked draft, and sell it as a joint plan, a historic compromise, or an ultimatum. An honest headline would sound more like, a list of one side's wishes, not translated into the language of international law, approved by nobody clear and delivered to nobody clear. But honest headlines don't generate clicks and don't sustain the illusion that someone is in control. So instead of silence until a real document appears, we get an endless stream of retellings of something almost nobody has actually seen. That's not just manipulation. It's a symptom that the adults have left the room. If you've ever seen a real international treaty, you understand the scale of the circus. In a serious document, it's clearly stated who the subjects are, who the parties are, what the obligations are, how verification works, and what happens if someone breaks the deal. In these peace plans from Telegram feeds, instead you get vague recommendations, foggy councils of peace, references to old treaties that have already expired, and a complete absence of an answer to the basic question, who is actually making a deal with whom? Now let's talk briefly about the physics of the process. Peace talks are only possible when one of three conditions is true. Both sides are exhausted to the point of we'll sign anything, or one side has clearly lost and signs the winner's terms, or there is a common arbiter both sides genuinely trust. Right now, we have none of that. Ukraine does not see itself as defeated and doesn't even entertain the word capitulation. European elites are also not ready to admit defeat, neither politically nor internally. Russia, whatever you think of its actions, is clearly not in the position of a country preparing to sign an act of surrender. Yet the plan, being hyped, effectively requires exactly that. Someone has to lie down under the paper and sell it as a fair peace. In short, the math doesn't care about ambition. Now to the favorite topic of many. America will sort it out again. To be a global arbiter, you need two things: power and the reputation of a neutral judge. The United States still has power. Nobody argues with that. The reputation is where the problem starts. In the bipolar era, things were simpler and, ironically, more honest. There were two superpowers, each with its own sphere of influence, its own protocols, its own intelligence services, its own diplomats who could sit in smoky rooms for weeks and tell each other no in different forms. Out of that grew treaties that actually worked for decades. Today, we formally have one former hegemon, that still speaks the language of an imperial arbiter, but in practice doesn't control even its own negotiating machinery. One senator rejects a plan in the morning. The same senator supports it a few hours later. Tomorrow, it turns out it wasn't his plan at all, but some advisor's draft. All of this runs in parallel with a president whose interest in foreign policy is roughly on the same level as his interest in merchandising and hat design. You want to build a stable security architecture on that foundation? Good luck. So we move to the first big layer, physics and money. Every war costs money. Every peace plan also costs money. Who pays for reconstruction? Who pays for armed forces? Who pays for security guarantees? On paper, you can hide this behind pretty words. In real life, it shows up as gas tariffs, profit taxes, plant closures, and rising sovereign debt. The European Union here is a textbook case of explaining to those who skipped math. You cannot simultaneously talk about rules-based international order, push a state into someone else's military infrastructure directly on a nuclear power's border, ignore that power's red lines and constitution, and then expect the conflict to end both beautifully and cheaply. It's like building a chemical plant on top of a fault line and then being sincerely shocked when something occasionally explodes. So let's take a breath. Where are we now? We do not have a single text recognized by all sides even as a baseline. We do not have a single arbiter trusted by Moscow, Kyiv, and the Europeans. We don't even have a clear list of negotiating subjects. Who exactly is Russia talking to? The US administration? Specific individuals? Some collective Europe? NATO as a bloc, or each member state separately? That's where a number appears that people in Brussels don't like to say out loud. Out of almost 200 states with flags, the truly sovereign centers of power number less than 10. The rest live with the illusion that their voice is equal because a charter says so. In practice, their position is determined not by speeches in an assembly hall, but by which center of power gives them loans, weapons, technology, and security guarantees. Here's the number nobody likes to mention. There are almost 200 votes in the hall and a single-digit number of real control panels in the system. Everything else is scenery. Let's zoom out for a second. After the Cold War, we were sold a fairy tale about the end of history and eternal globalization. One center, one currency, one set of values, one arbiter. It worked badly, but the system limped along for a while. Then came wars that did not bring any new world, only chaos. Then crises, sanctions, energy shocks, collapses of trust. Today we are entering a different regime, a long war for a new order. Not for justice, not for human rights, but for the right to define the rules of conflict for the coming decades. Not how we will live in peace, but by which rules we will fight and negotiate ceasefires. From here, all options are bad. The only question is who pays first. Against this background, the UN degenerates into an organization of concerned nations. It is excellent at issuing statements of deep concern and grave worry. It is no longer capable of solving structural conflicts between nuclear powers, because the model, every country is equal, collapses against reality. A world where the formal vote of a tiny island state equals the vote of a nuclear power with a multi-million army looks great in a textbook and works horribly in practice. In parallel, the thing that makes negotiations possible is disappearing. The class of real diplomats. People who know a conflict not from social media, but because they've spent 20 years elbow deep in it. People who know how to stay silent in public and work quietly, instead of chasing likes and airtime. Instead, the world gets bureaucrats for whom international law is just rhetoric for domestic audiences, and politicians whose main achievement before taking office was trading real estate or appearing on talk shows. And now, these people are writing the texts that are supposed to stop wars. Here's the part economists fear. When you hand a complex system over to people who only know PR, the system first lies to itself, and then it starts to fall apart. Now the question everyone avoids. What replaces this version of globalization? The softest scenario looks like this. The global universal order breaks into several civilizational centers, each with its own ethics, its own historical memory, its own idea of justice and security. an Orthodox world, a Catholic world, an Anglo-Protestant world, a Chinese world, an Indian world, an Islamic world in several versions. Between them, new forms of vassalage and suzerainty appear, like in the old system of great powers. Sounds scary? Compared to what we have now, it's the optimistic version. Because in that construction, you at least get an honest language. Whose security space is whose? Who is responsible for whom? Who actually negotiates with whom? The main problem is not that we have many conflicts. The main problem is that our global language still pretends these conflicts should not exist. We say universal human values when we are dealing with incompatible interests. We talk about a rules-based order when every major player interprets the rules to suit themselves. We call religious wars ideological conflicts as if the rebranding makes them less religious. As a result, any real conflict is presented as a malfunction, not as a normal part of the system. It's like wanting to command the sea while refusing to acknowledge storms. If you're watching from Germany, your reality will not look like Poland's or India's. But the structure is the same. You are told that somewhere in a closed room, a mature arbiter is writing a fair peace plan, and you just need to be patient a little longer. In reality, that room is noisy, everyone is drafting their own version, nobody trusts anyone, and any leaked draft immediately becomes a weapon in the media war. Does this look like strategy or managed decline? I don't believe in elegant exits from this knot after 2 or 3 rounds of talks. Not because I'm a pessimist, but because the structure doesn't allow it. For a treaty to appear that actually works as a new load-bearing document, you need at least 3 things: clear subjects with real power at the table, willingness to acknowledge unpleasant numbers, and a new set of conflict rules accepted by all major players. None of these conditions exist in the system right now. Elites are still playing the old unipolar game on a board that is physically cracking. It all sounds bleak, but honesty is the last luxury we can still afford. Better a cold diagnosis than a warm morgue with a label, "Everything went according to plan." So, in short, there will be many more peace plans. The number of points will change. The geography of talks will change. The signatures at the bottom will change. But as long as the structure stays the same, blurred subjects, a soup of interests, no real arbiter, and a media sphere that feeds on leaks and insider drafts instead of treaties, none of this is about peace. It's about continuing the war by other means. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and try to remember, slogans don't power grids, systems do.